Hey everyone, Kentemeyer here. Today I want to talk about how AI will change human meaning and happiness forever. And I want to be getting into timeline predictions specifically about how emerging technologies over the next several decades is going to fundamentally transform human existence in ways that we have not even been able to imagine over the next, since really the beginning of time. Now, a lot of people in the AI space as well as sort of these independent thinker types, have been mostly parroting the same story about how AI is going to take jobs by the end of the decade and it's going to destroy the relationship of work and human meaning forever. But people aren't really mentioning the other technologies that is going to completely destroy our current approach to finding meaning, finding purpose, and happiness in life. And I want to get into these technologies over the next couple several decades and talk about how they are going to completely transform human existence. Simply, you're not ready. This is maybe one of the most important videos that you could watch if you're antsy about the future or just interested in it, because the coming technologies will utterly transform the foundations upon which all meaning has ever been constructed. Current state of meaning, just going to go through this really quickly. Essentially, the current approach which humans think of finding purpose, finding happiness in life, is constrained by our biology, right? We have a huge focus on mortality, on resource scarcity, and also we have cognitive constraints which limit our ability to imagine and to solve problems. So maybe, which I'm theorizing, and I think that you're going to understand more as this video continues through, what we consider profound questions today about purpose are largely survival adaptations that helped our ancestors survive, not metaphysical truths. Let's start off with the next 5 years, really 4.5, because we're already halfway through 2025. The effects of the technologies emerging. First of all, I want to start off with Neuralink. And if you're not sure what Neuralink is, or you've not heard of it, it's a brain computer interface which it's able to interpret electrical signals in the brain and convert it into binary information, which a computer can then utilize for a variety of purposes. Essentially, we now have up to 10 participants which have a Neuralink installed, which they are able to they are able to interface with a computer simply through their thoughts. This has enormous implications for human meaning. And before I get into that, I want to mention how this is scaling up extremely quickly, exponentially. Nolan, who is the first participant in the trials of Neuralink, back in January 2024, I believe he first had it installed. It took about 6 months before the next iteration cycle, before the next individual who had it installed occurred. So we saw about a 6 month gap. But ever since then, every iteration of the next participant, the time was about halved. So now I think we're several days in between installations. I think Neuralink just announced this week that they installed two devices on the same day. It either was the same day or the same week. I can't remember. But the point is that every single time they install a new device, the time is being halved, meaning they're scaling up. And what does this mean? Well, potentially it could reach up to 1 million users by the end of the decade, not just by Neuralink, but through other BCI companies which are emerging. Technologies like BlindSight are being developed, which essentially is going to help people with complete blindness, not just some neurological condition which, makes them technically blind, but they can still see some light, completely blind, able to see, and then slowly be able to restore this vision to 4K, 20K capabilities. And what we're seeing is that if this scales up to, let's say, 1 million users by the end of the decade, this is going to make us rethink questions about what it means to be human. If you can have essentially a chip installed into your brain which can bypass biological limitations, maybe cure ALS patients, maybe cure quadriplegics, cure people who are blind, allow you to interface with maybe some sort of robotic arm or leg or something, then what does it mean to be human? And these questions are going to start emerging. But it's not really until the next couple decades after that, which I will talk about, that BCIs will completely destroy what it means, what happiness is, what meaning is. But it's going to start creating questions about what does it mean to be human. If we can essentially upgrade ourselves to having robotic, to having electrical components, where is the boundary between human and computer, human and AI? The next thing, which I think is going to emerge over the next decade, we're already seeing this, but it's kind of difficult to pinpoint how many jobs are actually being lost, is workplace displacement. So AI, if it can be, David Shapiro actually mentioned this over probably at least a year or two ago. He mentioned how if AI can do everything better, faster, smarter, and cheaper than the average human, why would you ever employ a human? So AI is going to be taking massive amounts of jobs. This is pretty much a foregone conclusion at this point. The whole question, though, is most human existence is wrapped up around these strong identities that we have to our education, to our job, our income, our position within society. And if AI instantly surpasses human knowledge work status hierarchies based on intellectual capability, or maybe your work or will completely shatter. So this is going to create an economic purpose vacuum because most people's lives are shaped around their job. Their whole identity is shaped around their job, and it's going to create massive meaning crises if people all of a sudden are just being laid off left and right. So if your entire life has been built around this idea that I am good at coding, I am good at being a lawyer, I am good at maybe some sort of administrative job, and all of a sudden you just get laid off to also some of these AI tools that are being released, who are you as an individual? How are you valuable? How are you going to relate to the world? And it's going to create massive problems because we're not going to know what to do with ourselves. So, part 3 here. Additionally, what we're going to see over the next decade is as work communities dissolve, relationship structures built around professional identity collapse. So, what are people going to be doing with all of their time now that their identity is no longer seen as economically valuable? And also, traditional religious institutions are going to start struggling incorporating neural enhancement with BCIs into existing theological frameworks. Some may call them immoral, maybe some of these like less developed ones or more ideological religions. And it's going to make us question at a deep level, especially religious people, what does it mean to not just be human, but what does it mean to be like a Christian or a Muslim, excuse me, or a Jew? So these are all questions which are going to emerge over the next decade. I don't think it's really going to hit some sort of crisis or going to fundamentally reshape anything too much, but it's going to start pushing us to the next decade, which I think the 2030s is really where everything's going to take off. So what's going to happen in the 2030s? At this point, it's a pretty much foregone conclusion that by the 2030s, we will have humanoid robots with full AGI becoming mainstream. So think of a robot that can not just solve advanced math or coding problems or help you write a paper, but they're literally embodied to the point where they can come into your house, clean it, understand advanced instructions, be able to perform pretty much any task a normal human that could do, but in an embodied robot. Potentially by the end of the 2030s, humanoid robots could outnumber humans, potentially. That's the high-end estimate, but we're certainly going to see them go mainstream. Depending on the cost, it's a lot of factors, but we're certainly at least going to be able to buy them by the 2030s. Medical advancements, and this is a huge one which people are not thinking about. If we have life extension breakthroughs, and it's a big if, it's most likely at least going to be able to add 5 to 20 years over the next couple decades to human lifespan. Now, the real question is, can we push past that essentially biological ceiling of around 100 to 120? Science, especially with things like CRISPR or epigenetic advancements, we're able to see that yes, we should be able to push past that mark, but at least by the 2030s, it's likely that we're going to have some sort of lifespan breakthroughs that will add 5 to 20 years to human lifespan. So right now in developed countries, the lifespan's around the late 70s to early 80s, but my generation or millennials could be seeing, by the time we get to our retirement age, lifespan estimates up to easily into the 90s, maybe even 100 is the common age. So if we're essentially living longer lives, this is going to culminate into questions about a purpose to our lives. Because, right, the whole idea of a purpose is built around scarcity of time. If there is not a scarcity of time in our lives, if potentially we are living longer than even 100 years old, living significantly longer, which I'll bring up in the next section, it's going to create questions about what is even, how can you even put an entire lifespan and simplify it into a single purpose for what you're supposed to do here. And this is going to push into the same topic of VR. So hyper-realistic virtual worlds probably becoming indistinguishable from physical reality near the end of the 2030s. We're at least going to see significant investment and advancement in VR by the start of the decade of the 2030s. And we're already seeing this investment come in, specifically from Meta whenever they bought Oculus a couple years ago. But as computing increases and we are able to develop more efficient algorithms and material science increases, we're going to be able to create VR simulations which are much more advanced, not just in the visual category, but also in the sensory. So imagine being able to put on some sort of device, or maybe be able to link in from like some sort of BCI implant into a virtual world. You're able to like zoom in remote into a virtual world that's very realistic to the real world. If this happens, the line between real and virtual is going to be blurred. So next sort of technology that's going to be emerging is early planetary colonization, which are first planet settlements established beyond Earth. So we're already seeing this with the Artemis 3. We're returning to the moon in 2027, I believe, or 2026. I can't remember. But we are going to essentially be moving beyond Earth in the next couple decades. And then this is the big one, mood engineering. So if we are able to engineer our mood through advanced pharmacology or BCI implants, what if you're able to just solve essentially mental health disorders entirely? So people imagine if you have ADHD and through a BCI implant, you're able to engineer or target certain areas, stimulate certain areas in your brain, which are able to regulate your attention span and help you be able to become more motivated, or help you essentially just be able to function normally. This is going to, this would be, everyone essentially would be able to do this. Everyone would do it if they had the opportunity to. So by the 2030s, we may see advanced mood regulation or mood engineering emerge, where we may be able to target specific areas in the brain and hijack our own biology so that we essentially can engineer happiness or satisfaction at a biological level. And now it may sound crazy, but Neuralink is already looking at doing this by the end of the decade, helping cure mental health disorders. But by the 2030s, and I think by the 2040s, we'll see this. And additionally, what's going to happen? So Identity liberation. Virtual worlds will shatter fixed identity concepts, freeing humans to experience existence across unlimited forms and possibilities. What we're going to start seeing is a mass exodus. Likely going to see this a mass exodus from the real world. It's probably going to be split into two categories. You have the Luddite types who are rejecting new technologies, especially VR technologies and BCI interfaces. And then you also have people who accept the new technologies and go more into the virtual world because it's more satisfying, more fun, less resource scarcity, etc. And meaning frameworks are built around consequences in the real world will start to dissolve when actions have no permanent impact. If you could go out and skateboard, say, why would you skateboard in the real world? This is a hypothetical. If you have the risk of injury, if you maybe have like some sort of physical limitation about getting tired, if you have to drive to the place, what if you can just remote into a virtual world which feels almost identical to the real world and skateboard around there, learning the same skills, having the same challenges without the risk of injury, without the having to drive to the place or go there physically, and you're able to remote in and play with your friends in real time. So as people inhabit these increasingly sophisticated virtual spaces, the concept of a real world will become an arbitrary distinction without meaning. This whole idea, this brain in a vat simulation that people will be talking about, how the real world, if you had if you're a brain in a vat and you could just will yourself to be happy, if you could just press a button and it would make you happy, I wouldn't choose that because there's a real world out here and it has meaning. That's going to completely dissolve. We're already seeing this with social media. People are becoming much more secluded and spending much more time online rather than the real world. This is only going to increase as VR and video games become more lifelike. It's just a foregone conclusion. The people who will reject this are just people who are scared, maybe more religious fundamentalists. But this whole concept of a real world and a virtual world, one of them having more value than the other, the line between that is going to shift. Here's the big thing. Life extension will obliterate time-limited meaning frameworks, forcing a complete reimagination of purpose beyond the constraints of morality. If we get longevity escape velocity by the 2030s, it's going to essentially force us to question, what does it mean? What is the whole concept of purpose? Because if we're living 200 years, how can you reduce down 200 years of experience into a single meaning framework? So this whole concept of a purpose to your life was born in a completely different time. There was no technological evolution. Really, you really wouldn't experience any technological evolution if you were born in like the year 1500 to the beginning of human civilization. You would not experience any technological inventions in your lifetime. So life moves way more slowly. You essentially were born and did exactly what your father did, and your grandfather did, and your great-great-grandfather did. So the whole concept of a life purpose was obvious because there wasn't enough change. You couldn't really change careers. But as technology has become increasingly more sophisticated and there's more options for freedom, then what has occurred is we've seen this whole concept of a single life purpose begin to dissolve. People now see life as multifaceted in many ways and see happiness as multifaceted too. There isn't just one thing that's going to provide you meaning or fulfillment. If we have unlimited virtual worlds, if we can engineer our mood, and if we're living for significantly longer, this whole concept of purpose will completely collapse. In fact, I think it will become an outdated notion. So whenever we ask the question, what is the purpose to life? What we're essentially doing is asking an outdated question based on biological and physical constraints, which will be transcended over the next several decades. People will have to completely reimagine what it means to find meaning. The whole definition will completely change. And now if we're talking about other spaces like relationships, intimate relationships are going to become increasingly conducted in virtual spaces. We're already seeing this trend again. Things like people meeting online have outpaced real-world interactions or couples who have met in the real world significantly. And it's removed physical constraints on connection. I was thinking about this, and I spend a lot more time now already with people. Well, not I spend more time with friends in person, but as these technologies continue to evolve, and if we get virtual worlds which are nearly identical to the real world, why would you ever interact in the real world? If the virtual world is nearly identical, or at some point it outpaces, it becomes better than the real world. So it may sound crazy now, but really think about it. There would be no advantages. They may become identical. So multi-world identity, people maintain different identities across physical multiple virtual worlds. Maybe a virtual world you're spending days or weeks in of your life, not at once, but just over time, you have a strong connection to it. So people who already, play video games like Minecraft, let's say they spend hundreds of hours in that game, they kind of get connected to that world that they're building. Well, now imagine spending thousands of hours in a virtual world which is much more lifelike. You can see how people can become attached to that virtual identity. Brain-computer interfaces, another huge one. Create new forms of communication beyond language, enable unprecedented intimacy. Imagine being able to not just maybe download information virtually, but also be able to share real-time thoughts to other people. So imagine being able to share a literal experience with someone. Let's say you watched a sunset. You're able to share that experience remotely with someone, not just the visual aspect, but the literal feeling, the literal audio, the experience itself. You're be able to remote that into someone else. So early mood technologies begin to arise, allowing direct regulation of motivation drive, disconnecting achievement from effort. This is a big one. If mood is connected, which it has been for thousands of years, to achievement or to survival, if we're able to hijack this and transcend these biological limitations, this whole concept of having to work hard or having to work for fulfillment may begin to collapse and be seen as a biological limitation. This is where it's going to really start getting crazy, the 2040s into the early 2050s. Consciousness transfer, mood engineering, and post-scarcity. Now, obviously, these things are speculative. It could come quicker, it could come slower, it just all depends. But I'm trying to be kind of that conservative range, but also understanding exponential technological growth. I think it may not happen this early, but at some point in the future, this century certainly, we will have some sort of ability to interface with AI and essentially have some form of digital consciousness. Now, I'm not saying uploading your brain to a computer, but over time, it may essentially be able to connect your brain to some sort of computational system which allows the transfer of consciousness to digital substrates. This is going to cause massive problems for religions. I'll talk about this in a second, but let's talk about the other technologies. Mainstream mood engineering, advanced neural and chemical technologies for direct emotional and state control becoming widespread. If we're able to engineer happiness with a click of a button, or design sort of like virtual environments, or essentially just be able to increase your motivation at will, then there's almost everyone would get this. I mean, it would essentially become the most important thing ever. Imagine being able to have the effects of Adderall if you're ADHD all the time. You're not wired. You can go to sleep, at any point. And you're always focused. You always feel motivated and like everything's going right in your life. Imagine being able to engineer that to your own specific neurochemistry. I mean, what's the point of who would not get this? I mean, it's the only people who would get it, or maybe some have some sort of ethical or limitation in their perspective where they value like some sort of conservative ideology about how things are always been done. But if you're able to essentially engineer your mood at will, why would you ever choose anything else? Why would you choose not to get this? So, thought speed, data transfer, direct brain-to-brain communication, speed of thought becomes possible. We're going to see at some point some sort of hive mind collective consciousness emerge, where we're able to interface with AI, interface with the internet, essentially have communication at the speed of thought. So as I'm speaking this video, my thoughts are going faster and I have to condense information, ideas down to language, but that's a limitation. If we're able to transcend language entirely, then that means that potentially new ways of existence may become possible. Humans become a true multiplanetary species with self-sustaining settlements across Mars and the Moon. Likely by the middle of the decade, we'll have at least the first permanent settlement somewhere. Advanced manufacturing, energy abundance, and resource scarcity ending material scarcity. AI ending material scarcity, excuse me. So here we go. Here's where it starts to get interesting. When consciousness exists independent of biology, the entire foundation of human-centered meaning will be revealed as merely one possibility among countless options. People are so unaware of how human meaning is really a biological. It's a result of biology, essentially. It's a biological limitation. If you're able to exist virtually or exist independent of biological constraints, it's going to completely dissolve this whole idea of what it means to be human. If you're able to engineer what you like, what you don't like, what makes you happy, what motivates you at will, I mean, this whole concept of identity of humanity is going to completely dissolve. AI human integration will create new forms of awareness that make current human consciousness seem as limited as a single musical note compared to a symphony. If you're able to think, let's say, at like megabit level speed of information, but then you upgrade that to gigabyte or upgrade that to terabyte, it's going to be crazy. In a recent Neuralink presentation, the summer update, they said how, the old computers would load pixel by pixel on the internet, but now it's instantaneously. And imagine that for your brain. That's the jump we're going to be seeing in cognitive capabilities. Collective experience revolution, shared thought spaces will fundamentally transform the concept of individuality. If you're able to just share a literal experience with someone virtually, then what's it mean to even be an individual anymore? AI systems will generate meaning frameworks of such coherence and elegance that they will reveal human philosophy as primitive pattern matching. Imagine being able to look at your biology and be able to virtually simulate and then give you some sort of meaning, some sort of video game, some sort of virtual environment which maximizes your feeling or experience of meaning. And maybe they're able to even do that in the real world with mood engineering and BCI integration. So when positive states can be directly engineered, the pursuit of happiness, the cornerstone of most meaning systems, will be revealed as an arbitrary biological directive. Relationship transcendence, direct consciousness sharing eliminates the separation between individuals that defines current relationships. Relationships, it's hard to even imagine what they're going to look like in the future. We're already seeing this, the death of monogamy. We're seeing it, it's, becoming increasingly common to have many partners throughout your life instead of one. Marriage is dying, divorce rates are going up. This is only going to continue as time goes on, as the boundaries between people are broken down. So if you're able to connect virtually with more people, if you're able to have experience, you're going to have thought-to-thought experience, shared existence, it's just going to completely transform things in ways that we don't even understand. Religious institutions either transform radically or become completely obsolete. Religion is going to become obsolete in the next century. It's inevitable. Not necessarily spirituality, but dogmatic religious institutions. Okay, so that's what I mean by that. I'm not saying people won't have spiritual experiences. I'm not saying we won't even be able to engineer them, or maybe we'll integrate them. Maybe science will finally understand what they are. But what's going to happen, at least, is the dogmatic religious institutions talking about meaning and purpose and who you are and what you need to be is going to completely collapse. It's just, there's going to be people out there, sure, but in order to have that worldview, you're going to have to reject all the technologies from here on out. So we're already seeing this, with the internet, the rise of the internet, ideas shared much, much more quicker. So dogmatic ideas oftentimes in the capitalistic marketplace of ideas, no one buys them. No one believes in them as much anymore because they don't work. So if this only continues, then likely these dogmatic ideologies will continue to become increasingly more obsolete. BCI-enabled hive mind optional collective consciousness experiences become possible through advanced BCIs. We talked about that. Complete motivation control. Advanced mood engineering allows precise control over all aspects of motivation, desire, and drive. This is just, people don't understand how much that alone would change things if everyone could just become 25% more motivated. But we're talking about orders of magnitude potentially here. Talking about being able to solve motivation as a neurochemical interaction. That would just be insane. And then multi-species ethics. New ethical frameworks emerge to accommodate human, AI, and hybrid consciousness forms where we're no longer able to understand the difference. Okay, so lots of stuff here. Really a general overview of this video. Basically, I'm just trying to get you to understand the grand transformation beyond meaning as we know it. The quest for meaning will be recognized as an evolutionary adaptation, a neurochemical process that helped our ancestors survive, not a metaphysical truth. Technology will make these processes transparent and editable. So, yeah, the very concept of finding purpose will be viewed as a quaint biological artifact, like hunger or fear, that can be optimized or transcended entirely. Future humans will create meaning directly rather than searching for it. For the first time in human history, we'll create meaning without the constraints that have always defined our existence. Mortality, scarcity, biological limitations, geographical isolation, and cognitive boundaries. Questions like what is the meaning of life will be irrelevant as asking about phlogiston or humors. So, for those who don't know, phlogiston was a theory of what fire was, that all substances which were flammable contained this mysterious substance called phlogiston. I'm theorizing that the questions like what is the meaning of life will become as irrelevant as the theory of phlogiston. Entirely new frameworks will emerge that our current language and concepts cannot capture. As technology enables infinite experiences across virtual, physical, and digital realms, no single meaning framework will dominate. Humanity will embrace a radical plurality of purpose systems across different substrates of existence. The ultimate freedom. This is the liberation of human experience from arbitrary biological and environmental constraints. Technology will free us to explore dimensions of existence and fulfillment that were previously inaccessible to our species. All right. Longer video today. Big overview. I'm going to dive into these more specifically in the future. But just to get you an idea, shit's about to hit the fan.